And in New York, they had a rule, over 100 years old, that you basically had to go and beg for the police for the right to bear an arm. Doesn't matter if you were an upstanding citizen, you didn't have that inherent right. You'd even have a process in which you could get that right and that ability, as I believe the Second Amendment allows. We've got these Second Amendment rights that have been under attack for over 100 years in the case of New York, and which allows me to segue to a major decision by the Supreme Court. Justice Thomas, in an opinion again that is well worth reading here, it's New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin, Superintendent of New York State Police. And essentially, the court said, no more is this Second Amendment a second-class right. It is a first-class right and needs to be treated with respect. And in New York, they had a rule, over 100 years old, that you basically had to go and beg for the police for the right to bear an arm. Doesn't matter if you were an upstanding citizen, you didn't have that inherent right. You'd even have a process in which you could get that right and that ability, as I believe the Second Amendment allows. And so the Supreme Court of the United States, in a 6-3 decision, so you had all the Republican appointees against the three leftist appointees, voted to uphold let's put it this way, the court voted to expand Second Amendment protections and explain to the states that you have this federal right and they can't infringe upon it without proper reasoning and going through the right processes. This is the final statement by Justice Thomas. I encourage you to read this decision because, like in the Roe decision, it exposes a lot of the lies that you've been hearing from the media that's been echoing the left's anti-gun agenda and alternative history. If you want to know about the right to carry and the understanding of the Second Amendment and all sorts of other things related to that, I encourage you to read this decision because it's extremely educational, and we'll make it available on our website. The constitutional right to bear arms in public for self-defense is not a second-class right, subject to an entirely different body of rules than the other Bill of Rights guarantees. We know of no other constitutional right that an individual may exercise only after demonstrating to government officials some special need. That is not how the First Amendment works when it comes to an unpopular speech or the free exercise of religion. It's not how the Sixth Amendment works when it comes to a defendant's right to confront the witnesses against him. And it is not how the Second Amendment works when it comes to public carry for self-defense. New York's proper cause requirement, meaning you have to show proper cause to get the right to defend yourself outside your home, violates the 14th Amendment in that it prevents law-abiding citizens with ordinary self-defense needs from exercising their right to keep and bear arms. We therefore reverse the judgment of the Court of Appeals and remand the case for further opinions consistent with this opinion. Well, the good news is for gun rights is that there are only like 5 or 6 states that essentially prohibit you from bearing arms outside the home. I think as Justice Thomas highlights, it's absurd to say that the whole second, if you can't, you've got this right to keep and bear arms. You just can't say that second part means nothing. It obviously doesn't mean, as he highlights, bearing an arm from your kitchen table to your bedroom. It means walking around with a gun. Now, does it mean that that right is unlimited? It doesn't necessarily mean you have a right to a concealed weapon, although I think arguably you do. But the point is, you have a right to bear an arm. And that's what the left hates. First of all, they don't believe you have an individual right to keep and bear arms. And according to this dissent, you have 3 justices on the court that would allow the Second Amendment to be eviscerated. And I encourage you to read not only Justice Thomas's decision, but the concurring opinions, especially Justice Alito, who takes on the leftist dissent, really politicalization of this judicial decision. You know, he writes, and this is something that is worth repeating, and talking about New York, no one apparently knows how many of the 400 million privately held guns are in the hands of criminals, but there can be little doubt that many muggers and rapists are armed and are undeterred by the Sullivan Law, which is the law that restricts gun rights in New York. Each year, the New York City Police Department confiscates thousands of guns, and it is fair to assume that the number of guns seized is a fraction of the total number held unlawfully. The police can't disarm every person who acquires a gun for use of criminal activity, nor can they provide bodyguard protection for the state's nearly 20 million residents, or the 8.8 million people living in New York City. Some must traverse dark and dangerous streets in order to reach their homes after work or other evening activities. Some are members of groups whose members feel especially vulnerable, and some of these people reasonably believe that unless they can brandish or if necessary, use a handgun in the case of attack, they may be murdered, raped, or suffered other serious injury. And as I noted online, I issued a tweet. Have you seen this terrible story? And the stories about how the police in that Texas school shooting were just sitting outside the room, refusing to do anything to move in to stop that mass shooter. And what the left wants to do is they want to turn every citizen into the equivalent of those teachers who had zero ability to defend themselves and the little ones around them, because they were unarmed, and it would be impossible to be armed in the face of that evil shooter. The Second Amendment protects your right to defend yourself, which is a God-given right. And as this court highlights, it's as important as any other right. And indeed, Justice Alito notes, when you start messing with the Second Amendment, you're messing with the 14th Amendment that provides protection of the laws to all citizens. So I can see why the left really hates Justice Thomas, because he's so smart, so honest, and so meticulous. Which is why they're trying to destroy him, and why we must be careful about protecting the Supreme Court's rightful role in our constitutional system. Because if we don't have a judicial system that is able to operate independently in deciding rule of law questions, then all of us could eventually lose our rights in our republic. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.